Hey, this is Chadillac. You're here with the CRP. I'm here with guest host Miguel Iterati, and we are talking about UFC 241 and what the wrap-up actually means. So we're looking into the future. We're kind of saying, that fight didn't seem really big to maybe the fan who wasn't the hardcore MMA fan, but to those of us who watch MMA and kind of live and breathe it, and it's our lives. That fight was a much, much bigger fight than any of the smorgasbords of great, exciting, fun-filled trash talk fights that we've seen in the past. Would you agree with that, Miguel? You think this was a much more important fight than maybe the others, than maybe like the last 4 or 5 shows we've seen? Do you think this is a bigger fight?
Yeah, are you talking about the main event or the
last 2 fights of the night? Yeah, Nate and Pettis, and then DC and Stipe.
I mean, the show's getting reviews for, being the show of the year, pretty much. And I mean, with the main event, with the main event, you had a rematch, right? So the story kind of was there for itself. And, and the fact is that, it was a long time coming, especially for Miocic, right? He expected the rematch or wanted the rematch earlier. But, that storyline was there to be played through. So and it played through, pretty well. So, they have a potential trilogy there that comes out of it. They have potential to do Stipe against Ngannou, which is a rematch, and they could go to Stipe versus John Jones. So they actually have a wide range of options. All of them will make less money than DC versus Jones 3, but that's okay.
Yeah, and you know what? I know we just talked about this and we planned on going from one to the other. While we're on it, let's just go ahead and hit it. Let's talk about DC and Stipe, okay?
Sure.
Because here's the question I have now. Did the UFC in that 4th round, did the UFC go, shit?
Yeah, I think so.
You think they did? I think they did too. I think that just wasn't what they wanted. And more importantly, did DC go, oh, now I've got a problem, because now I didn't just get beat by a guy who's on steroids. I just got beat by a guy who I smoked last time in the 1st round. And I kind of thought that would happen. I just thought that size would finally get to him. And he just, it seemed like he gassed out. Maybe he's 40 years old. And that brings up the idea, at 40 years old, does DC hang it up? What happens?
I mean, the gassing part, he gassed out, but it came after 8. You could rate them from about 6 to about 9, maybe a 10, but 8 high-level body shots. They were. I rate that one a 7. That one was an 8. A little bit better. Okay, back to a 7. Okay, that one was a 9. But he was nailing him with every one of those body shots, and every one of those is the kind of thing that I give credit for DC for standing there and sort of just looking like he was taking him. At the end of the day, I do think it is the body work that got to DC in that case, and I think that was part of the problem. But and I think you said it yourself. DC, he was being talked about as the best fighter on the planet, and this, that, and the other thing, the Jones rivalry aside, you know what I mean? But, and he was pretty good in terms of very few people have made him, look bad in the octagon, or, he's beaten a long list of top guys, even pre-UFC when he dominated Josh Barnett, it was a way
dominated Hendo.
And a message, to those guys, So
yes.
So Cormier seen very little adversity in his MMA career, especially inside the ring. So after 3 rounds of putting in the work he put in, and he was tired, they were both tired. But after the 3 rounds of putting in, I think and we've all seen so many fights, right? I think you have a natural feeling that, all right, if we cruise to the end, I got this. DC was probably up on the cards, and he probably came out and said, I just got to keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the problem there is that Miocic had a response, right? The body shots, and then that opened it up. And then, he found himself in deep water, didn't have an answer, on the fly right there. And, Fernand Miocic ran away with it. So I think it was a well-executed, game plan or materialized for Miocic there, and he deserves a lot of credit. And for DC, I think the first, you get the question here, except for John Jones, nobody's made him face any adversity. Except for Stipe now.
Yeah, and our Stipe's biggest fan, of course, is our MMA analyst, the sensational Devin Miller. And Devin's he's so dead on most of the time. I will say this: I picked all 3 of the final fights and got all 3 of them right for once. And so usually I say whatever I pick, bet against me. But on this one, I had a real good feeling about it. But with DC and Stipe, I was a little bit nervous, but I even said, if this goes quick, it's DC. If it goes long, it's DC. It's that middle space at 40 years old. He carries a lot of extra weight in his midsection. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. Sometimes that can even mean a guy can actually go more. But what it does usually mean is that when they get hurt, they don't tend to be able to recover quite as quickly. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think, I can't recall a sequence of 7 or 8 body shots like that at any point in the UFC fight. You know what I mean? And so I think, like we said before, just the fact that he stood after the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, at that point, and, you could sort of see him when he took the first head punch when it was the beginning of the end and he got hit there. You could see the deer in the headlights look of like, I can't move.
Like,
there's no react. I can't move. Like the deer's stuck there. DC was stuck there and just watching it come because the brain and the body were not connecting anymore.
Right.
So, I think it's like I said, the number one thing here is to credit Miocic for that and for what he did. And the fact that Miocic has the way he went out leads you to believe, he's got a Mir Khan in him or somebody like that, But he took some shots this fight, and he was able to, he stayed with it and stuff like that. But I don't like the strategy of taking shots for a rematch with Ngannou, but which I think is what's should be next for him. And I think it is what the UFC will do because
and do what with DC?
Well, DC, I think, should retire, to be honest with you. I mean,
you should. We both agree with that because we know about brain injury. But what he should do, will he do that? That's a whole different thing. Tell me that. What's he really going to do?
No, I think DC's smart, and I think that DC isn't going to make a decision right now. I think that he'll think about it, and I think that because he's a smart guy, that retirement is very definitely a possibility. Hopefully he put the money away. The problem with it is, to me, for him, is that I could see beat Stipe, you get the Jones fight. The Jones fight is the big payday, right? Chael Sonnen did a podcast where he thinks it's an $8 million loss to John Jones' side. So Jones lost a big payday. DC also lost a big payday. Figure whatever that is, right? So I think that would have been the lure of him fighting, another fight after this weekend. Losing to Stipe, you also open up the possibility of the Stipe trilogy.
Yeah.
But the money won't be the same.
Which you talked about when we originally talked about this.
Except for that the money won't be quite the same. I mean, it'll probably be good money and it'll definitely be a compelling fight, but it won't be quite the same money. And from a motivational standpoint, maybe DC does see, the writing on the wall at 40 years old, You had this situation where you had John Jones as the great nemesis, the guy you couldn't beat. Everybody else, hey, I'm good with. Now there's another guy.
That hurts. That hurts.
How does that feel? You just got you were in first place, in the IndyCar race, and now you're nearing the end of the race, and you just got passed. And rather than hope for a chance to make that up, you get passed by another car. You know what I mean? So it's like, and so DC, I think there's a lot to think about, and I think most of it will be, you know, the putting his psychological end back, you know, for one more win, making that a motivational thing, knowing, you know, that he doesn't have a 6-year run left in him, you know, and just getting it all together for one big final fight, win the belt, retire. You could build that story. But again, like I said, for DC to come back to Jones, that was the big money fight. For DC to come back to Stipe is definitely a B choice by everybody, by the UFC, by DC, by everybody except Stipe, right?
Okay.
So I don't know if he comes back. And then to me, I think what happens is the UFC says, we've had Stipe as champion before. He doesn't move the Q score blip radar, and we're gonna rush him into a Ngannou fight and hope Ngannou wins.
Okay, so let me ask you this: anytime you get a champion that he can't move numbers for whatever reason, he can be the greatest in the world. And you know, we saw that with Mighty Mouse, and he just can't move numbers. You know, Ciedo is moving numbers that Mighty Mouse never could have even touched, and he's still not moving the numbers that Stipe moves, or you know, they're about the same really. So, and that's probably because of DC, not because of Stipe. I mean, almost assuredly. So there are a lot of different things that the UFC's got to consider. There are a lot of things that DC has to consider. And we leave out, again, we leave out, as Devin's always saying, the one guy that matters most in this, the champion, the guy who's earned his right to be there. He's defeated everybody on Murderer's Row, and then he got beat by a murderer himself. You know, I mean, DC is as bad as it gets. And this time he went out there with a smarter plan. He stayed away. He didn't let him close the distance so much. You know, DC still did that thing where he grabs his hands and tries to kind of control. But in the fourth round, that backfired on him. And like you said, he caught a couple of body blows, and it was almost like you could see Stipe go, I got him. But you could also almost hear the air go out of the stadium. And so, and definitely out of UFC executives. So I wonder what happens when Stipe stays champion for 5 more fights. Does he just kind of become that guy that, you know?
I mean, to me, the right thing to do here is if you don't like Stipe, if you don't like your champion, your obligation is to get him beat. But you got to get him beat within the scope of, you know, what is competition, right? Right now, they have a guy who can beat Stipe, and that's Ngannou. You know, Francis Ngannou has gotten all the work done to build him up into the monster that could beat Stipe. Now, if I'm not mistaken, they fought before and Stipe owns a win. That just makes it more juicy because ever since then, you know, Ngannou's been, you know, on a roll, et cetera, et cetera. And I think Ngannou's the guy that really has a Q score there. You know, of all the guys there, you know, even, you know, if you put Ngannou against John Jones, all of a sudden people go, whoa, you know, he might be able to beat John Jones. You know, just the level of power he's brought. And he's already shown it on some elite guys and stuff. So Ngannou's a scary guy. And what to me, and what people shouldn't underestimate is Dana White and, you know, the fact that the UFC, or rather the parent companies, will be delving into boxing before the end of this year.
Yeah.
They stated that they will be, and they're heading that way. And to be quite honest with you, if there was somebody that you could put in with the world heavyweight champion that's on the UFC roster, it's not Stipe Miocic, it's not Daniel Cormier, it is Francis Ngannou.
Agreed. So not to beat a dead horse on this, but where does what I mean? Okay, look, they have arguably the greatest pound for pound fighter in the world in Mighty Mouse, and he stayed there forever and just seemed pretty much untouchable in what to me is probably the hardest weight class to fight in, because the skill set is just so far above everything else. They're kind of the best. They can do everything great, and they can have a lot of power and knock people out. So they cut that class, or well, they were going to cut that class. but they can't do that with the heavyweight class. So not to beat a dead horse, but if Stipe sticks around and he beats Ngannou, and I mean, really, isn't the fight to make Stipe and Jones? Isn't that really the one? I mean, if I'm matchmaker and if I'm promoter, I go, let's do Jones right now with Stipe.
Yeah, I don't think
What do you think?
I think that they pass on that. I think that they leave Jones dominating at 205, and that they push Ngannou to the forefront, giving them the 2 stars there. That's just my opinion. I think it'll go that way. If Jones were to say, "Hey, I do want to move up," then yeah, you could justify that, and they'd probably bill it as a super fight champion versus champion, most decorated heavyweight champion of all time, a 2-time champion. Blah, 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 versus, the greatest fighter of all time, John Jones, blah, blah, blah. You could build that, but again, the thing is, and I don't say this with any disrespect, but Stipe is a fireman, and I mean, it shows, and that's good. That's part of his appeal to the people that like him. But to the crossover fans and to the, fans that take you from, 400,000 pay-per-views to 1 million pay-per-views, I don't know that Stipe is the guy that the UFC wants there. And I think, by putting him on cock block after he lost the belt to DC while they flirted with Brock Lesnar, I think they displayed that.
Okay, so one more thing about with the heavyweight, then let's move on. I mean, the heavyweight has been drastically undernourished in the UFC for a long time. They're just. I mean, I don't mean any disrespect to any of those guys. They're all really good fighters. But man, you don't see the heavyweight fighters that we used to see in Pride that were just they look like executors. Where's the Mark Coleman, the Kevin Randleman, the Boz Rutan? Where's the Maurice Smith? Where's that guy from the old school UFC academics? Where is that guy in today's era? Why haven't we seen him? Why haven't we seen some great football player that didn't really make it in the NFL, but he's just a terrific athlete, sort of Jones's story, whatever it is, the Matt Mitriones and all that. Why haven't we seen some guy who's a fantastic athlete who weighs 262 pounds and he's shredded and he's got an 8-pack and he looks like an action figure? Why haven't we seen that guy come in and be the world champion in the UFC yet?
Well, in some way, he's not a football player, but Lesnar was that, right? Lesnar came in off the bat and did that. And if you're looking for a repeat, I think, the sport's changed a little bit, and I mean, the bottom line is they moved to a more homogenous type of fight where, everybody pretty much knows what everybody else knows. There's a little less surprises. And what that does is if everybody's doing more or less the same things in the ring, where then you've got announcers like Dominic Cruz is like, oh, that's wrong, that's right, because that's the right thing to do in that position. There's a, very black and white stuff there in the way they're presenting the in-the-ring stuff. That leaves the only shot that the fighter has at moving a Q score is being, recognized outside the ring, and inevitably that calls in, it's played out. There's nothing fresh about Colby Covington or anything like that. So that's the thing to me about letting the in-ring work do the talking. The guy who is a guy that they should do that. But you're absolutely right. I think we should just move on to the welterweight matchup because I think for the next few years we're going to see that the heavyweight division is going to be in recycle mode. And that there is a dearth of talent there that you're waiting for somebody. You mentioned football players. They've got Greg Hardy on development, I mean, that's, how those experiments go. So let's just go right to Masvidal and Diaz and Pettis here.
Yeah, so again, I felt very, very comfortable in calling this one. I felt like Nate had Pettis everywhere, and I think he did. I think he showed from start to finish. Even though Pettis was definitely a bigger fighter, in pretty much every way, he just looked really athletic and big, and looked great. But that always makes me worry against the Diaz brother when I see a guy go out there who's all muscle, and looks like they've been spending a lot of time in the iron piles, because that tells me one thing for sure: heavy muscle burns heavy fuel. And if Pettis is kind of trying to put on weight, and that's part of his focus is to gain power and to be really comfortable at 170, which I think he is, that's the Diaz brothers' game. Give me these big, tough, strong guys, and I'll make them punch themselves out for the first minute and a half of the round, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to slap them, and then in the last minute I'm just going to absolutely tear them apart. And then round 2 starts, I'm going to tear them apart for 30 seconds and then back off. And as they're trying to catch their breath, I'm going to try some different things. And I don't know, man. I think the Diaz brothers are a type of fighter that they broke the mold when they made those two guys. And I haven't seen anybody like them before or since. And man, you got to love that, right?
No, I agree with you. I think Nate came back here for an entertaining fight. I think to me, the thing that jumped out at me in the first round, and in the first round really was Pettis' best moments, right?
Yeah.
And Nate looked like maybe he wasn't getting started, right? Like a couple of people I've talked to said, he wasn't putting the foot to the pedal, or he wasn't hitting the gas or whatever it was, and I didn't see it that way. I saw it just from the start. I was like, oh boy, this is interesting, because I saw it more like the Mickey Gall fight with Diego Sanchez, where Sanchez was toying with him. And I really do think that Nate Diaz definitely let Pettis blow his load in the first round.
Yep.
Took everything he had just to see. If he had been in trouble, then you put the pedal to the gas and you answer, right? But he was never in trouble, even though Pettis was throwing it at him. And, that gave him the confidence going into the second round. The second round, once you start upping the ante, see, what he did with that, too, is with Pettis throwing everything at him and Nate still being in the game, you force Pettis to maintain that pace or increase it, right?
Yeah, really throw it.
If not, then all you've done is blow your load in the first round, and then you're not fighting at the same efficiency. And that's what he achieved right off the bat.
Agreed.
He won the fight that way, I thought. And then the rest of it that you showed was classic Nate.
Yeah.
He doesn't throw a lot of kicks when he's in his game. He likes to punch. His punching. At first, in the first round, if I was going to criticize it, I was worried about it, because I said to myself, I think he's playing possum here. But is he really let his boxing go that much? I mean, is he that sloppy here? Because he really didn't look good. But there it was, in the second round and stuff. And Pettis is a game cat. He was fighting to hurt.
But Pettis is a Rufus guy, okay? And so he's really your traditional kind of fighter. And okay, so Pettis had a plan. So he and Duke sat down and the whole staff, and they say, okay, round 1, we're going to come out and we're going to really throw some stuff at him. We're going to try and get him out fast, and we're going to see what he does. And then, at 3 minutes into round number 1, we expect to be here or here. And if it's here or if it's here, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Coming into round 2, coming off the stool, if he's even still standing, then we're going to do this and this and this. The Diaz, you don't hear the corner over there going, look, I want to see more of those leg kicks. I want you to really sweep that lower leg, kick that ankle. I want you to take that out from under him. He's standing heavy on his lead leg. Throw that jab really hard and then follow it with a small leg kick, and just keep doing that to really bother him and get under his skin. They don't say that in his corner. They're like, you're doing great. Kick his fucking ass. Right? I mean, am I wrong about that?
No, I think Nate's not the kind of guy that's like looking for advice either in a fight. I think he knows what he's doing. And I think that part of the confidence the corner brings is that there's a lot of that goes without saying between them. You know what I mean? It's like, of course he knows the leg kick. I'm not going to tell him that. He's going to look at me and go, of course, stupid, or not now, stupid, or whatever he's feeling at the moment. They all know each other, so they're kind of really in tune. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Rufus, even in the past, has been maybe guilty of not adjusting well in a fight, you know? Mm-hmm. And here's a situation where, that may be the case. I think with Diaz, like I said, once he got through the first round, I think you said it all. You said, it looks like Rufus's game plan was to come out and test Diaz and see what he's got. Well, Diaz showed you absolutely nothing. So
yeah.
How do you go into round two with that? Well, okay, he does this, we're going to work off that. You got nothing. All he did was watch you. You showed him everything, he gave you nothing. So, yeah, and then from there, okay, we got to change game plan. That's not what comes from Rick Rufus's camp, So, yeah, kudos to Diaz. It was a master performance.
Okay, so last thing about this, and we'll wrap it up for the night then. I know what you're saying, it's got to be George. It's got to be George. But why not Conor?
Well, I'll tell you what. I think this is what the most important thing is. That we're in the 21st century, and that the UFC is a huge mega corporation.
Yeah.
And they never even Nate Diaz didn't mention Conor in his post-fight interview. There was no mention of Conor anywhere in the commentary during the fight. Dana White didn't mention Conor as a potential opponent anywhere afterwards. I think what you saw is a little bit of a freeze out of Conor McGregor. He was recently in trouble this very week for another incident in a bar where he struck an old man.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. Like I thought that was fake at first.
And yeah, so you're in a situation there where I think that was a very deliberate situation. I think Nate, being as savvy as he is, and also not. And I say this with respect, though, but Nate wants to get paid when he fights. He doesn't want Nate could come to my living room and beat the crap out of me, but at this point, if he could come beat the crap out of me in a stadium, he would rather do that so that he could get paid, and then he can go bike and do buy pot and do all the rest of it. They've never been shy about liking to be paid for their efforts.
Yeah, like Tito Ortiz told Ken Shamrock in a post-fight news interview I saw one time. Kenny kicked the chair and said, "Well, fucking go right now, Tito." And Tito goes, "I'm not going to beat you up for free, Ken."
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Exactly. So my whole point with that is that, the natural best payday for Diaz or anybody in that division or those weight classes is Conor McGregor. Why not call him out with all the emotion of the post-fight stuff? I believe he was told not to. Dana White also mentioned, when he calls out George and he's kind of not looking at the camera, calling out George like, "George, I want you." It was kind of like one of those things. I don't know if it was a script or not, or if it came from the heart or not. But I would tend to think that this was a whole thing. On top of that, you consider that Masvidal's been calling out Conor. Masvidal's been calling out Khabib or Conor. That's what he wants, nothing else. Now all of a sudden, Nate materializes, and Masvidal all of a sudden is like, "Yeah, that's a great opponent. I'll take that." The payday speaks there. The payday speaks there for both, so you can keep both of them happy, and you've sent a message to Conor McGregor because now really Conor doesn't have an opponent.
Yeah, right. I agree with that. And I think you're probably dead on. I hadn't looked at it that way until now. I think they've said, "You know what, Conor? You've got your little $100 million. We got $4.6 billion, brother. We're not in the least bit worried of whether or not you're going to fight. Yeah, we want you to, but people are still watching. They're still going to buy tickets, and we're growing every day with streaming. We're making more and more, and we don't need to pay you half of the stadium that we take in with these guys. We'd rather let these guys fight, and we don't care about you because it equals out to the same amount, right?"
Even if Conor was active fighting and on the roster and they were pulling in all that money, the UFC would be wise to be planning for a post-Conor world. And, you know, with Conor being an X factor outside where he can't stop, you know, beating up people over cameras or over, you know, people can't refuse a proper 12 shot around him and stuff before he snaps. You know, it's maybe they came to the realization it's time to move on now. It's time to, you know, be ready now because we may not have him, you know. So I think that was a huge part of the message that was sent by the UFC between the lines this past weekend, not mentioning Conor McGregor, when two natural rivals of his are being put together. I think that says something.
I guess I'll just wrap my part of it up with this. I said from day one, I think Conor is a built fighter the same way that Ronda Rousey was a built fighter. There was a lot more hype train than there was hurt train. And I'm not saying that they weren't great fighters, Ronda or Conor, either one. But when you've got somebody who can talk that well and they look that good and they can perform that well against the right kind of opponent, if you're a matchmaker and a promoter and you don't build that, you're an idiot. So, they built what was there and took advantage of it. And it's part of the reason that they're $4 billion now is because of those two people. And neither one of them are around. Because as soon as Ronda got defeated, everyone knew it was done. As soon as the chink in her armor was exposed, she was done. And I think Khabib, with Nate, I think they go, oh, that's a question. And then he goes out there and he barely beats Nate. Beats him, but not by much, and does it with a great game plan. Then he goes out there with Khabib and just gets exterminated. And at one point, it's rumored that he was saying, it's just business, man. It's just business. So I don't know how much of that is or isn't true, but I know this. I know that Conor is not really in a big hurry to fight Nurmagomedov again because he took a beating on that, and he was embarrassed. I mean, he really embarrassed him. So, where they're concerned, they might just be in the real world again, and they left Disney World and Conor World and came back to the real world, and they go, oh well, we've got fighters that can kick his ass all day long, including Masvidal, and including Nate. Nate comes in on his best, he's going to beat Conor. 3 out of 5 times he's going to beat him, and so there you go. That's my take on it, and I'm very excited to see George or Jorge, whatever you want to say. I'm very excited to see Masvidal and Nate. I love both of them. Of course, we've known Masvidal from basically day one, and not known him, but we've been there from day one with AFC and all that stuff. So to see him really come up and finally get the big shot, the big payday, I love that. And so I wish them both the best. And if Nate loses that, he keeps fighting. It doesn't hurt him. If George loses that, he's still in the running. So if Conor loses, he's done. He's done. So they're really waiting for the right opponent to come for Conor, I think. I think that's as much as anything. The right opponent has to be there to keep the commodity there. And I'm done on that. I'll let you finish it out.
No, everything there, makes sense. And the problem for me here is that, this fight was at 170. I don't think we want McGregor at 170. I don't think the UFC wants it at 170. Now, that corrals him at 155. 155, you've got Nurmagomedov, who's already beaten him. And the bottom line is you can line them up, Justin Gaethje was a potential opponent. Tony Ferguson would probably not, I could see McGregor not doing well with, a handful of the guys at 155 pounds. So he's no longer really in the title picture, really, unless you want to manufacture it. And if he's going to be, he has to be in the title picture for a 5-round fight. He has to be there, for the paydays and stuff like that. The bottom line is McGregor made the most money he's ever going to make for the Mayweather fight. He's not going to top that or repeat that. And if he was going to do that, he would have already done it somehow, and that isn't going to work. So, in other words, for his next fight, now he's looking at making less money than he was making against Khabib. He's just back in the rotation. no matter who he fights, it's going to be like, the Yoel Romero fight this past weekend, a third fight in support of 2 main events. So McGregor is the guy that's not really fixed. He's the guy who's with the pay cut coming, is the guy who may be chafing and returning and stuff like that. And then from there, it's like, who are you going to put him in against? Because it should be top flight guys. So I think what was done this weekend was a little bit of the outing of McGregor. The UFC not mentioning him in the broadcast. Nate Diaz, the trilogy, was a natural opponent that many people thought they were waiting in the wings for that. And for them to go the Masvidal direction just took it a completely different way. And I think that was also, on top of the fact that they made a pretty good fight, a very deliberate message to McGregor.
Yeah, that's a brilliant way to analyze that, Miguel. And that's why they pay you the big bucks, and I just ask questions. Hey, this has been Chadillac. That's Miguel Literati. This is the CRP. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, share, like, all that good stuff. Let us know what you do and don't like, and we'll keep doing what we're doing. We feel like we're bringing a lot of people, and boy, our numbers are sure rising, Miguel, so we must be doing something right. So, looking forward to some guests. Miguel's got some old school coming on again. Make sure you check all that stuff out, and we'll see you again real soon. We'll be on tomorrow. Until next time, namaste.